On a farmer's land left to die by her own people. Alien girl inches from harvester. The morning dew clung to the tall grass of Terra Vista's eastern plains as Ethan Mercer guided his ancient harvester across the golden fields. The rumbling machine had belonged to his grandfather, then his father, and now him, its weathered metal frame a testament to human perseverance on this distant colony world. 50 years since Earth ships had landed, and most colonists had flocked to the sprawling cities. Not Ethan. He preferred the honest simplicity of tending to the land, away from the complications of colony politics. The rising sun painted the horizon in hues of amber and violet, one of the peculiarities of Terra Vista's atmosphere that still captivated him after 15 years of solitude. His farmhouse stood silhouetted against the colorful sky, a humble structure of reclaimed wood and local stone that he'd built with his own hands after the Dissolution War had claimed his family. Another day, another harvest, he murmured to himself, adjusting the harvester's guidance system. The machine lurched forward, cutting through the waist-high grain with methodical precision. That's when he heard it. A dull thud, followed by a high-pitched mechanical whine that didn't belong to the harvester's normal operation. Ethan slammed the emergency brake, jumping from the operator's seat before the machine had fully stopped. His heart raced as he dropped to his knees beside the massive cutting blades, now stilled but still warm from their rotation. Beneath a thin layer of soil and tangled roots lay a figure unlike any he had seen before. A woman, or at least a female-formed being, with skin the color of pale opal that seemed to shimmer with internal light. Her delicate features were marred by bruises that pulsed with a deep purple luminescence. Around her wrists, intricate metal bands inscribed with symbols Ethan couldn't comprehend reflected the morning light. "My God," he whispered, carefully brushing soil from her face. She was breathing, but barely. As gently as he could, Ethan slid his arms beneath her slight form and lifted her from the dirt. She weighed almost nothing, as if her bones were hollow. Her eyelids fluttered at his touch, revealing irises that shifted color like the surface of a soap bubble, from emerald to sapphire to amethyst. "You're safe now," he said, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. "I've got you." He carried her back to his farmhouse, laying her on his bed with care. The mysterious woman's skin felt cool to the touch, and now that he could see her clearly, he noticed the intricate patterns that seemed to flow just beneath her translucent epidermis, like constellations mapping an unknown sky. When Ethan tried to remove the metal bands from her wrists, she suddenly seized his hand, her eyes wide with terror. "Talek vos miran," she whispered, her voice melodic despite her obvious fear. "Nar eska devian." "I'm not going to hurt you," Ethan said, speaking slowly and clearly. He mimicked drinking water, then pointed to her bands, shaking his head to indicate he wouldn't touch them again without permission. She relaxed slightly, her gaze darting around the rustic room as if searching for threats or escape routes. When Ethan offered her water in a clay cup, she sniffed it cautiously before taking a hesitant sip. "Nima," she said finally, pointing to herself. "Nima Callis." "Ethan," he responded, placing a hand on his chest. "Ethan Mercer." Over the next several hours, Ethan tended to her injuries as best he could with his limited medical supplies. A deep gash along her side revealed that her blood was silvery and thick, like liquid mercury. She winced when he cleaned it, but didn't pull away, watching him with eyes that shifted between wariness and wonder. By nightfall, Nima had fallen into a fitful sleep. Ethan sat in a chair beside the bed, wondering what series of events had led to this strange woman being abandoned in his fields, bound in ceremonial chains. The colony reports occasionally mentioned encounters with other spacefaring species, but nothing like her. Outside, Terra Vista's twin moons rose above the plains, bathing the farmhouse in pale blue light. Ethan gazed out the window, feeling the weight of a decision that would forever change his solitary existence. Whoever she was, and whatever danger had brought her here, He couldn't simply turn her away. For the first time in years, Ethan Mercer was no longer alone, and despite the uncertainty that came with his mysterious visitor, he felt a curious lightness in his heart as he watched over her through the night. Hesitant trust, the first week passed in a delicate dance of cautious gestures and fragmented communication. Nima spent most of her time by the farmhouse window, watching Ethan work the fields with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Her recovery was remarkable by human standards. Wounds that would have taken weeks to heal were closing before Ethan's eyes, leaving behind faint silvery traces on her opalescent skin. "Field grain?" she asked one morning, pointing to the golden expanse outside. Her voice carried a musical quality, each word rising and falling like notes in a gentle melody. "Yes," Ethan replied, slicing fresh bread at the kitchen table. "I grow wheat and barley, food." He gestured to the bread, then to his mouth. Nima nodded slowly. "On celestial harmony, no soil work, only synthesis." She struggled with the unfamiliar words, having absorbed basic English partly through some unexplained ability and partly through Ethan's patient teaching. "Celestial harmony? Is that your home?" Ethan asked. A shadow passed across her iridescent eyes. "Was home, no more." She approached the table hesitantly, her movements fluid and graceful despite her lingering injuries. The ceremonial bands still encircled her wrists, but she had allowed Ethan to examine them more closely. They appeared to be made of a metal unknown to Earth science, with symbols that shifted and changed when viewed from different angles. "These bands, they're part of why you were left in my field, aren't they?" Ethan asked, placing a plate of food before her. Nima's fingers, slender and elegant with an extra joint that made them unusually dexterous, traced the patterns on the metal. "Mark of the unworthy," she explained. "I carry defect." Defect? Ethan couldn't imagine what could be considered defective about the ethereal being sitting across from him. She extended her hand, palm up. At first, Ethan saw nothing unusual, but then she closed her eyes in concentration. Slowly, a pattern emerged on her palm, a spiraling glyph that pulsed with gentle blue light. "The empathy mark," she whispered. "In celestial harmony, emotions considered impurity. Leaders believe perfect society needs control, not feeling. I feel too much." A single tear slid down her cheek, crystallizing into a tiny gem before it fell from her jaw. It clinked against the wooden table like a small diamond. Ethan stared at the tear gem, then back at Nima. "Your people abandoned you because you feel emotions?" "Not all emotions. Connection emotions, empathy, love." She closed her hand, extinguishing the glowing mark. "I see others' pain, feel it, cannot ignore. Makes me broken." Ethan felt a surge of anger toward a civilization that would discard someone for having compassion. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "Not to me." For the first time since her arrival, Nima smiled, a slight upturning of her lips that transformed her face. "Your world's strange, Ethan Mercer. You live apart from others, yet value connection." The following days brought a tentative routine. Ethan would work the fields in the morning while Nima rested. In the afternoons, she would join him, watching the farming process with increasing interest. Despite her weakened state, she insisted on helping with small tasks, sorting seeds, preparing meals with earth ingredients that fascinated her, and tending to the small garden of medicinal herbs behind the farmhouse. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Terra Vista's spectacular sunset, Nima pointed to a distant cluster of stars barely visible in the darkening sky. "There," she said softly. "Third star of Celestial Sisters constellation. My people's sun." Ethan followed her gaze. "Why did they leave you here, on a human colony? Why not somewhere uninhabited?" Nima's luminescence dimmed slightly. Ethan had come to recognize this as a sign of sadness or discomfort. Celestial harmony believes in symmetry. For one life to ascend, another must descend. I was chosen for the purification ritual, left on world of lesser beings to die. Perfect balance. Lesser beings? Ethan raised an eyebrow. A look of embarrassment crossed Nima's features. Not my words. Council of Matriarchs sees humans as primitive, emotional, like me. She hesitated, then added, Council wrong about many things. How did you end up the one chosen for this ritual? Ethan asked, passing her a mug of herbal tea he'd brewed from his garden. She accepted the drink, warming her hands around the ceramic. I was scholar of ancient texts, found forbidden knowledge, that celestial harmony once valued emotion, before. Great purge. When I questioned matriarchs, they discovered my mark. Her voice dropped to a whisper. My own mother, High Matriarch Celiane, ordered my purification. Ethan felt his chest tighten at the revelation. Your own mother condemned you to die. In celestial harmony, bloodline means nothing. Genetic purity, everything. Nima took a small sip of tea, her eyes reflecting the first emerging stars. She believed she was saving me from corrupted existence. The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Ethan placed his hand on the porch railing, palm up, not touching her but offering connection if she wanted it. After a moment's hesitation, Nima placed her hand near his, not quite touching, but close enough that Ethan could feel the subtle energy that seemed to emanate from her skin. Tomorrow, he said gently, I'll show you how to plant seedlings in the south field, if you'd like to learn. Her eyes shifted to a warm amber hue. Happiness, Ethan had learned. I would like that very much, Ethan Mercer. As night fully embraced the farmlands, they sat in companionable silence, two souls from different worlds finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The hesitant trust growing between them felt fragile yet somehow stronger than the ceremonial bands that still bound Nima's wrists, a bridge across the vast distances that had brought them together. Blossoming connection. The southern field bloomed with new life under Nima's attentive care. What had begun as a simple lesson in planting seedlings had evolved into her personal project, a garden filled with hybridized plants that combined earth species with techniques Nima remembered from Celestial Harmony's botanical archives. The results were stunning. Luminescent flowers that glowed softly at night, vegetables with twice the nutritional value, and grains that grew in synchronized patterns that resembled the constellations of her homeworld. The soil responds to biorhythmic harmony, Nima explained one afternoon as Ethan marveled at her work. 3 months had passed since he'd found her, and her command of English had improved dramatically. Plants sing to each other beneath the ground. I just helped them find the right melody. Ethan watched as she knelt beside a row of what appeared to be tomatoes, except their skin had a subtle blue sheen. When she placed her hands near the roots, the empathy mark on her palm pulsed gently, and the plants seemed to lean toward her like sunflowers following light. Is that what you studied before? Ethan asked, kneeling beside her. Nima nodded, her hair, which had grown longer and developed subtle, shifting colors like aurora borealis, falling across her face. I was studying life connection patterns. The ancients believed all living things shared a universal consciousness. She looked up at him, her eyes shifting to a thoughtful violet. Your Earth philosophies have similar concepts. I've been reading your books. Ethan smiled. During the long evenings, he taught her to read English, only to discover she absorbed written language with astonishing speed. She'd quickly devoured his modest library, everything from practical farming manuals to the few treasured novels he'd brought from Earth. "You've given this farm more life in 3 months than I managed in 15 years, he said. "You gave me life first," she replied simply, rising to her feet. The ceremonial bands still circled her wrists, but they had loosened over time, no longer chafing her skin. They couldn't be removed. They were genetically bonded to her, but they seemed to be losing their power as Nima gained strength. They walked back to the farmhouse together as Teravista's sun began its descent. The evening ritual of preparing dinner had become a shared pleasure, Ethan teaching Nima traditional earth recipes while she introduced subtle modifications that enhanced flavors in ways he couldn't have imagined. "I've been thinking," Ethan said as he chopped vegetables for their stew, "we should celebrate the first harvest from your garden. The colony holds a summer festival in 2 weeks. We could go together." Nima froze, her luminescence flickering with anxiety. "Among others? Humans? Not everyone in the colony is like me, a hermit who prefers his own company," Ethan said with a self-deprecating smile. "Most are good people, and they trade for goods you can't produce yourself. We could sell some of your hybrid vegetables. They'd fetch a good price." She was silent for a long moment, absently stirring the pot on the stove. "What if they see I'm not human? The bands—" "We could cover them with fabric," Ethan suggested. "And your luminescence is subtle enough in daylight that you could pass for human with unusual coloring. Some colonists have genetic modifications anyway." He paused, suddenly uncertain. "But we don't have to go if you're not comfortable." Nima turned to face him, her expression resolute. "In celestial harmony, fear of difference drove me out. I won't let fear control me here." She took a deep breath. "I'll go." Later that night, after dinner, they sat on the porch swing Ethan had built the previous week. The twin moons cast their blue-silver light across the fields, making Nima's garden glow with gentle bioluminescence. The night was warm, and the distance between them on the swing had gradually decreased until their shoulders touched lightly. "Tell me about before," Nima said softly. "Why you live alone?" Ethan's hand instinctively went to the scar that ran along his jawline, a permanent reminder of the dissolution war that had torn apart the early colony. "I was a medic," he said, the words coming easier than he expected. "During the conflict, between the colony factions, I tried to stay neutral, treat the wounded from both sides." "Like my empathy mark," Nima observed. "Feeling for all, regardless of side." Ethan nodded. "My family, parents and sister, ran a community hospital. When the Eastern faction decided the hospital was helping too many Western civilians." He trailed off, the memories still sharp after all these years. Nima's hand found his in the darkness, her touch cool and comforting. Her fingers intertwined with his, the extra joint allowing her to hold his hand in a way that felt strangely perfect. "You don't need to continue." "No, I want to," Ethan said. "The hospital was destroyed. I was the only survivor because I was out gathering supplies. Afterward, I couldn't bear to be around people, their politics, their divisions. So, I came here, started the farm. Been alone ever since." He looked at her, his voice softening. "Until you." The air between them seemed to vibrate with unspoken feelings. Nima's skin glowed more intensely, tiny patterns of light dancing across her arms, like constellations coming to life. "Ethan," she whispered, "on celestial harmony, what grows between us would be considered the highest impurity." Her free hand rose to touch his face, tracing the line of his scar with gentle fingers. "But I've never felt anything more pure." When their lips met, it was like worlds colliding in the gentlest way possible. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, and for a moment, he could sense what Nima experienced, the emotional resonance she perceived in all living things. It was overwhelming and beautiful, like suddenly hearing a symphony when you'd only known single notes. As they drew apart, breathless, Nima's eyes had shifted to a deep rose color he'd never seen before. The empathy mark on her palm glowed brightly, Between them. "What does that color mean?" Ethan asked, his voice husky. Nima smiled, tears like tiny crystals forming at the corners of her eyes. "It means I'm home," she whispered, leaning forward to kiss him again. Later, as they lay together in the darkness of the farmhouse, Nima traced patterns on Ethan's chest, while he ran his fingers through her aurora-like hair. The connection between them had transcended physical boundaries, creating something neither had experienced before, a bridge between two vastly different beings that somehow felt like the most natural thing in the universe. "They'll come for me eventually," Nima said quietly. "When a purification subject doesn't die, it disrupts the balance. The matriarchs will send seekers." Ethan pulled her closer. "Let them come. This is your home now if you want it to be." "Our home," she corrected him, her luminescence pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "And I will defend it as fiercely as you." Outside, the hybrid garden seemed to glow brighter in response to their newfound connection, as if the plants themselves were celebrating the unlikely bond between a solitary human farmer and an exiled alien scholar who had found, against all odds, exactly where they belonged. The return, the summer festival in New Providence, Terra Vista's largest settlement, buzzed with activity. Colorful stalls lined the central plaza, offering everything from handcrafted tools to exotic foods. Ethan guided Nima through the crowd, her hand firmly in his. She wore a flowing dress of indigo fabric that Ethan had traded for, with wide sleeves, covering her ceremonial bands, and a wide-brimmed hat shading her distinctively luminescent features. "Breathe," Ethan whispered, sensing her tension. "You're doing wonderfully." Their stall had drawn considerable attention. The hybrid vegetables and glowing flowers from Nima's garden had sold out within hours, earning them enough credit chips to purchase supplies they couldn't produce themselves, specialized tools, fabric, and rare spices that Nima had developed a fondness for. "They don't see me as different," Nima marveled, as another satisfied customer walked away with a basket of blue-tinged tomatoes. "On Celestial Harmony, I was isolated for my impurity. Here, my differences are valued." "That's Terra Vista at its best," Ethan replied, though he knew the colony had its own prejudices. He'd deliberately chosen a festival day when security forces were minimal, reducing the chance of anyone questioning Nima too closely. As the day progressed, Nima's confidence grew. She spoke with customers, explained the nutritional benefits of her hybrids, and even laughed at the jokes of the spice merchant in the neighboring stall. Ethan watched her bloom before his eyes, shedding the fear that had followed her since her arrival. It happened as they were packing up their unsold items at dusk. Nima suddenly stiffened, her eyes widening as they shifted to a pale, alarmed gray. "What is it?" Ethan asked, immediately alert. "A resonance," she whispered, her voice tight. "From the stars. Celestial technology." Before Ethan could respond, the festival's atmosphere changed. People were pointing skyward, where a streak of silver cut across the darkening sky. A ship entering Terra Vista's atmosphere, its design unlike anything produced by Earth colonies. "Seekers," Nima breathed, her skin dimming with fear. "They've found me." They abandoned the rest of their goods, hurrying through back alleys to reach Ethan's old transport vehicle. As they drove away from New Providence, 3 more silver streaks appeared in the sky. "They're deploying in search pattern," Nima explained, the ceremonial bands on her wrists beginning to glow with an ominous light. "The bands, they're tracking devices. That's how they found me." Ethan pushed the transport to its limits, the engine protesting as they raced across the darkened plains toward the farm. "We need to gather supplies and move to the caves in the eastern ridge," he said, his mind racing through possibilities. "We can hide there until—" "Until what?" Nima interrupted, her voice gentle despite her fear. "They won't stop, Ethan. Celestial Harmony doesn't abandon its rituals. The purification must be completed, or answered." When they reached the farmhouse, Ethan grabbed his old medic's pack and filled it with essentials, while Nima collected seeds from her garden, whispering what sounded like farewell blessings to the plants. They had just finished loading the transport when the first seeker ship descended from the clouds, hovering silently above the southern field. It was elegant and predatory, like a silver dragonfly. A beam of pale light shot from its underside, materializing into 3 tall figures with the same opalescent skin as Nima, but lacking her warmth. Their features angular and cold, their movements precise and mechanical. "Stay inside," Ethan ordered, reaching for the pulse rifle he'd kept from his medic days. "No," Nima said firmly, placing her hand on the weapon. "Violence will only confirm their belief in human primitiveness. Let me speak to them first." Before he could protest, she stepped out into the yard, her luminescence brightening with determination. The seekers approached, their own skin emitting a harsh, blue-white light. They wore form-fitting attire that seemed to shift with their movements, and carried slender wands that Ethan suspected were weapons. "Defective Nima Kalis," the tallest seeker announced in the musical language of celestial harmony. "Your purification is incomplete. The balance must be restored." Nima replied in the same language, her voice strong. When she switched to English, Ethan realized she was ensuring he understood. "I reject the purification. I have found harmony here that celestial harmony has forgotten." "Impossible," the second seeker stated. "This primitive world offers nothing but chaos and emotion." "Exactly," Nima said, the empathy mark on her palm glowing brilliantly. "Emotion is not impurity. It is the foundation of true connection. The ancient texts were right. Our civilization has lost its way." The third seeker stepped forward, raising her wand. "High Matriarch Selieni anticipated your corruption. We are authorized to complete the purification by force if necessary." Ethan moved to Nima's side, his hand finding hers. "She's not going anywhere," he said, facing the seekers with the steady gaze he'd developed during the war. "Your ritual ends here." The seekers exchanged glances, clearly surprised by his intervention. "The human defends the defective," the first one observed. "Emotional contamination is worse than we feared." "Not contamination," Nima countered. "Evolution, growth, the very principles celestial harmony once cherished." As tension mounted, a second ship descended, larger and more ornate than the first. The seekers immediately prostrated themselves as a beam of intense white light revealed a majestic figure. Even without introduction, Ethan knew who she was, Nima's mother, High Matriarch Selieni. Her resemblance to Nima was striking, though her features were harder, her luminescence controlled to emit only the palest light. The ceremonial robe she wore seemed to absorb and redirect light around her, creating an aura of untouchable authority. "Daughter," she said, her voice carrying both power and a hint of something Ethan couldn't identify. "You have disrupted the great balance." Nima stood tall, still holding Ethan's hand. "Mother, I have discovered what our people have forgotten. The connection between all living things. The true harmony." "Dangerous idealism," Selieni dismissed, though her eyes lingered on their joined hands. "The purification must be completed." "Then, you'll have to purify me too," Ethan said, stepping slightly in front of Nima, "because I won't let you take her." What happened next would forever change both their worlds. New Horizons High Matriarch Selieni's eyes narrowed as she studied Ethan. "You would sacrifice yourself for a defective. For what purpose?" "It's called love," Ethan answered simply. "Something. Your perfect society seems to have purged along with empathy." The word hung in the air between them. The seekers shifted uncomfortably, their wands still raised but wavering slightly. "A primitive concept," Selieni stated, though something flickered across her face, a momentary disruption in her perfect composure. She turned to Nima. "Show me this connection you claim to have found." Nima hesitated, then extended her hand, the empathy mark glowing on her palm. "See through my eyes, Mother. Feel what I've learned." To Ethan's surprise, Celianne stepped forward and placed her palm against Nima's. The contact created a sudden burst of light that enveloped both of them. Nima gasped, her eyes widening as the ceremonial bands on her wrists vibrated and cracked. For nearly a minute, mother and daughter stood frozen in silent communion. When the light finally faded, Celianne stepped back, visibly shaken. The perfect control of her luminescence had faltered, revealing patterns beneath her skin that matched Nima's. "Impossible," she whispered, staring at her own palm where a faint outline, similar to Nima's empathy mark, had appeared. The defect. It was always there. Suppressed. "Not a defect," Nima said gently. "Our heritage. The connection our ancestors understood before the Great Purge." Celianne turned away, her regal posture momentarily abandoned as she processed what she had experienced. The Seekers looked to her for guidance, confusion evident in their rigid stances. "High Matriarch?" the lead Seeker ventured. "The purification protocol is suspended," Celianne declared, her voice carrying a new timbre. She faced Nima again, her expression transformed by something Ethan recognized as wonder. "I felt it. The farm, the plants, the connection between you and this human. It's like the ancient texts described, the universal harmony we dismissed as primitive mythology." Nima stepped forward, her ceremonial bands now crumbling away to reveal healed skin beneath. "Mother, what if our pursuit of perfection has led us away from true harmony? What if emotion isn't impurity but the very essence of connection?" Celianne was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving from Nima to Ethan, then to the hybrid garden, glowing softly in the twilight. Finally she spoke. "The Council must reconsider many things, beginning with the purification ritual. And those like me," Nima pressed. "Others with the empathy mark who have been cast out or suppressed?" A shadow of remorse crossed Celianne's features. "There will be resistance. Centuries of belief don't change in a moment." She straightened, reclaiming some of her authority. "But change will come. I will see to it." Ethan watched this exchange with cautious hope, his hand never leaving Nima's. "And what about us? What about Nima's choice to stay here?" Celianne regarded him with new interest. "You would keep her on this world, away from her people." "I would let her choose," Ethan corrected, "something your society never did." The tension dissolved as Nima stepped between them. "I don't have to choose one world over another," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Perhaps I can bridge them instead." 1 year later, the southern field had expanded into an extensive research garden. Scientists from New Providence worked alongside a small delegation from Celestial Harmony, studying the hybrid plants that flourished under Nima's guidance. The farmhouse had grown too, with a new wing built to accommodate visitors and a small laboratory where Nima documented the biorhythmic harmonies she could perceive. Ethan watched from the porch as Nima demonstrated cultivation techniques to a young celestial researcher, one who, like her, bore the empathy mark. Since Celianne's return to their homeworld and her controversial revelations to the Council, dozens of defectives had emerged from hiding, their suppressed abilities now recognized as valuable rather than dangerous. Change came slowly to Celestial Harmony. The purification ritual had been officially suspended, but centuries of belief in emotional purity couldn't be undone quickly. Yet seeds had been planted, literal ones in Terra Vista's soil and metaphorical ones in the minds of Nima's people. "Deep thoughts?" Nima asked, joining Ethan on the porch as the evening's work concluded. Her hand slipped naturally into his, the empathy mark pulsing gently against his skin. "Just appreciating how much has changed," he replied, pulling her close. A year ago, I was a hermit who could barely talk to the merchants in town. Now I'm hosting interspecies agricultural conferences. Nima laughed, the sound like crystal wind chimes. And I was an outcast meant to die alone. Now I'm a cultural ambassador. She rested her head against his shoulder, her luminescence synchronizing with his heartbeat as it always did when they were close. Do you ever regret it, standing against my mother, risking everything? Not for a second, Ethan said, kissing the top of her head. Though I'm still getting used to having your mother visit for dinner. The high matriarch of celestial harmony sitting at my kitchen table, asking for second helpings of apple pie. She's changing too, Nima said softly. The empathy mark that awakened in her that night has grown stronger. She feels the connections now, just as I do. As Terra Vista's twin moons rose, casting their blue light across the expanded farm, the research team packed up their equipment and headed to the guest quarters. In the quiet that followed, Ethan and Nima walked hand in hand through the garden that had started everything. The first hybrid plants now fully matured, their luminescence creating patterns that mirrored the stars above. They stopped at the center of the garden where a new structure stood, a small nursery built in a blend of earth and celestial architectural styles. Inside, a cradle waited, its design incorporating both the practical woodworking Ethan had learned from his father and the flowing organic patterns of Nima's homeworld. Do you think she'll have the mark? Ethan asked, his voice hushed with wonder, as he thought of their unborn daughter, due in just 2 months, a genetic miracle that the scientists from both worlds were still trying to understand. I don't know, Nima answered truthfully, placing their joined hands over her rounded belly. But whatever gifts she brings, she'll be free to use them. Not just surviving between 2 worlds, but helping them grow together. As if in response, Nima's skin glowed brighter, and Ethan felt the now familiar sensation of their child's presence, a tiny consciousness already reaching out through Nima's empathic abilities, connecting with both her parents and the living world around them. The ceremonial bands that had once bound Nima had been reforged into a pair of matching bracelets that they both wore, symbols not of punishment, but of transformation. Like the hybrid plants in their garden, they had created something entirely new from distinct origins, a connection that defied the boundaries of worlds, species, and beliefs. New horizons, Ethan murmured, the phrase they often repeated to each other. For all of us, Nima agreed, her eyes shifting to that special rose color that Ethan now knew meant love in its purest form. Above them, a shooting star traced a silver path across Terra Vista's night sky. Not a celestial ship this time, but a simple cosmic traveler, a reminder that the universe was vast and full of unexpected connections waiting to be discovered by those brave, enough to reach across the divide. In the quiet of their garden, surrounded by the gentle glow of plants that shouldn't exist but thrived nonetheless, Ethan and Nima sealed their shared vision with a kiss. 2 beings from distant worlds who had found, against all odds, a harmony more perfect than either civilization had imagined possible.